scheme.
So we're going to be talking about driving the developmental agenda through CSR, or corporate social responsibility. We're looking at the opportunities for convergence of global developmental goals with what companies and ongoing CSR programs hope to achieve. And ultimately, there can be no conversation in India without the conversation around the 2% CSR mandate. We were one of the first countries in the world, or the first country in the world to have done so. And we've had a 3 to 4 year period to analyze that, and we'd like to talk a little bit about that as well. To begin this panel, I'm actually going to quote something that Mr. Arun Maira wrote some time back in a column. He said, "The world is moving on two tracks which are not converging. On one track are institutions concerned with a narrowly defined economy and with GDP. On the other track are institutions concerned with what GDP does not measure: environmental sustainability, human dignity, livelihood, and justice, the concerns of the social developmental goals. The two worlds of GDP and the SDGs must come together." And on this note, I'm going to start with Mr. Nuru and ask you to weigh in on this. In what spheres must we see GDP and SDGs come together? What role must the government play in narrowing this gap? And more importantly, what role can the private sector play in narrowing this gap?
Traditionally here, what we see is that there's a lot of government intervention, and the sort of like compartmentalization between government, private sector, NGOs is very, very segmented. How do we better assimilate and synergize our efforts in a collective kind of way is what we need to see how we move forward. Now, in India in particular, I think there's a lot of tremendous scope for that because, India has moved significantly in terms of development. The World Food Programme in particular has been here for about 53 years. Our first entry into India was in terms of food delivery. But nowadays, in the last 12, 15 years, we have not delivered anything here. We're now into a partnership with government, okay, in trying to see how we can give capacity building and technical expertise for government to actually move things forward. We cannot do this without the private sector, whether or not it's in identification of beneficiaries who get the ration cards, all the way through to transparency in the systems of delivery. Roughly.
Do you find, sir, clarity on the role that the private sector feels it must play? And in your conversations with them, how do you see them define business responsibility? For companies that are in the food and beverage space, for instance, do they see tackling SDG 2 as core to their business? Or do they see it as a good to do, something that will look nice as a PR release and so on and so forth?
When you look at food security and hunger, and we have a lot of that, not hunger so much, but malnutrition in India. At stunting rates well above 25%, wasting rates again above 25%. We have 800 million people who are getting subsidized food from the government today. We have $20 billion being spent on subsidized food. Now, private sector has a very big role to play in this. And what I'm seeing is that because hunger, malnutrition is a long-term thing, it's a chronic thing. It's been ongoing for years and years. It's very difficult for private sector to actually get involved in that because they prefer the quick wins, kind of short-term, build a couple of classes there, build a couple of schools there, put computers here, build a clinic here, as opposed to a long-term kind of how we can come out of malnutrition. But we, again, should be supporting private sector to give them a plan, a long-term, medium plan, and long-term plan on how we can consecutively come out of this.
And do you find them now more receptible to accepting these plans?
In many ways, really, it is still the social responsibility as opposed to a technical kind of mandate which they're involved in. But luckily also the issue of hunger and stunting, it appeals to everybody as a person, as a human being. But linking it with what they do as their core function still is a very big issue.
Nisha, one of the things that Mr. Nuru brought up was that it still remains social. Right? Oxfam in 2015 came out with the India Business Responsibility report, or the index. You all left out the word social. It was business responsibility. I want to ask you to talk a little bit about why business responsibility and not corporate social responsibility, and the findings from the 2015 report and how they've evolved in the 2017 index that was released only a couple of days ago.
What we did was we took as our starting point the national voluntary guidelines that the government came out with on responsible business. And these are now mandated by SEBI for the top 100 listed companies, and they have just been mandated now for the top 500 listed companies. So we will start to get these responsibility reports from 500 companies that we will start to analyze. So the title of the conference was Going Beyond. That's our main message, that there are 3 ways in which businesses need to go beyond if they want to be truly responsible businesses. Number 1, of course, is going beyond the 2%. The 2% CSR has really become a fig leaf for doing well or for responsibility. And we are saying it's not how you spend your profit, but how you earn it that matters. It's how you do business. It has to be about the entire 100%. Are you treating women well in your labor force? Are you buying land fairly? What is your treatment of water? What is your treatment on climate change? Do you pay fair wages going beyond minimum wages and so on? So this is the biggest message. The second going beyond is going beyond compliance. Even if you were to follow all the mandatory guidelines now, I'm saying mandatory for the 500 companies, they're so weak. Compliance says 1 woman on every corporate board. So why 1 woman on corporate boards and not 50%? What we are finding in the report is companies are making progress, but very, very grudgingly and only till compliance, and then they don't do anything beyond. It's as if like we'll meet the minimum law, you know? And the third way we say going beyond is going beyond the company. So it is your whole supply chain that matters, and that is where the communities come in. Who are you buying those goods from when you produce for KFC? It'll be a whole lot of small women farmers. They are very much part of your responsibility. They're not somebody else's responsibility. And if CSR is, this 2% is going to mean looking at my backyard, and if all the IT companies in Bangalore invest in Bangalore, or the banking sector in Bombay invests in Bombay because their employees can engage and feel good, this inequality is going to explode. This money should be going to Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Bihar, Assam, Orissa, the poorer states of India, not mixing up with employee engagement. I think that has to be kept very, very separate and paid from a separate, another 2% of profits.
All right. So Nisha's brought up a couple of points, and I think the perfect segue for Balaji. Let's talk about how Vodafone, over the years, has framed its corporate social responsibility program in India, taking cues from what is done globally, but yet localizing.
We are a company that globally has about 30 odd years of existence. Last year, we already celebrated the 25th year of our Vodafone Foundation, so which means that giving and to be socially responsible is part of our DNA. So in the Indian context, prior to the 2% rule, we were already contributing to social causes. Whether we made money in India or not, funds were being, through diligence on certain social sector partners that we did, make sure that got to the intended beneficiaries. So we have strong partnerships.
Social causes, I think that is becoming a point of contention going forward. Corporate responsibility in business versus social cause. So perhaps, the fine line could be that it's not okay to be damaging the environment at one level, but building a school somewhere as social responsibility. That just doesn't cut it anymore.
Right. So I'm saying being a responsible business is a given for us. That's the foundation on which we work. We also said we have a significant focus on a few areas that we believe we can make impact on. Now, we moved along from checkbook philanthropy to saying, okay, if there is some core competence that we have in business and that can also help social sector partners to scale up, then we will do it. So we've chosen connecting for good as the overall theme, under which we've chosen few areas that, by the way, fit into the SDG in 3, 4, 5. In some manner, we look at education, we do look at health and well-being, and we look at empowerment of women as the 3 focus areas that our energy is driven towards. And given that we've actually got set up a whole mobile network across the country, more than 50% of our customers are in rural India. We understand scale. We've got 2 million people that are actually rural entrepreneurs that are selling telecom service and products, not just our own, but also the rest of the sector. I could give you anecdotal examples of how we've changed the lives of livelihoods of Rudi Vens in Gujarat, where their livelihood has gone up about 400% just by simple things like making sure we have inventory management capability put on simple feature phones using SMSs and USSD, the star hash kind of tools, they're able to actually deliver better, service to the community and also earn 400% more revenue than they did before.
American Express, it's a company that works, in the premium segment, so to speak, as far as banking and payments in the country are concerned. How do you view CSR? What is corporate social responsibility for American Express? How have those 3 or 4 areas that you work in been identified? I know that you take cue from what happens globally and then try to interpret it and localize it for India. So if you can take us through what the larger philosophy is that drives CSR at American Express and the localizations for the country.
As far as CSR is concerned, we have 3 key priorities in American Express. One is we've been the founding member of World Monument Watch. So you will call it CSR, you call it giving back to the community. So we are very passionate about preserving the heritage of the markets we operate in. The second big thing we are focused on is building leadership in the not-for-profit segment. So for last 6 years, American Express hosts what they call a leadership academy, where we invite nominations from top or from many not-for-profit institutes. And our belief is if we are able to train the leaders of those institutes better, it will be a multiplier effect and they will be able to go back and do what they're doing a lot more effectively. And finally, we have a very strong employee give-together program where we encourage employees not only to participate through giving a part of their personal salary in CSR activities, but also volunteering. One of the contrarian views I like to make, and this is probably my ignorance and working in a corporate sector, is that ever since this 2% rule has come, I think it has acted as a catalyst in organizations like ourselves. So the agenda of how that money is spent, how effectively we use it, who participates, has become a much more visible dialogue in organizations like ourselves than it was in the past, where there was a group of people who were following certain corporate mandates to do things.
Is your concentration now on just those 3 areas? Are you now looking to expand into some other areas that for India perhaps are more critical?
Essentially, we are very keen to improve things. But the challenge for a company like us is, can we find good partners or good programs or good initiatives to work in where we know that our contributions will finally lead to some kind of an end result. And that becomes a big stumbling block, because if we think about our core competence might not be in some of those areas.
Right. I want, Nisha, for you to come in on this. What could, solve the problems of a company like American Express that perhaps wants to do more, but clearly doesn't have the expertise to work in malnutrition or primary education or primary healthcare, and must they really be focusing on that?
Yeah, so I'd like to just start with the issue of should it be about core competency, okay? There are some issues, and you named a few of them, infant mortality. We work on an issue on violence against women. It's no business's core competency, really. And the government is not doing anything about it either. We passed a law 10 years ago, it remains on paper. There's no grand scheme behind it. Even the little Nirbhay fund, not 1 rupee has been spent. Should a company like American Express only work on financial inclusion? No, I think we all need to decide what are the most burning issues for India. Is it malnutrition? Is it violence against women? What are they? Right? That kind of conversation is so missing. So you always hear this lament saying, we don't know where the trustworthy partners are. But even if you were to start, like, because there are, okay, so by some estimates, 3 million NGOs, so everybody's very confused about which are the good ones and which are the bad ones. But say the 40,000 that used to have an FCRA, those you would know that we report in triplicate to the central bank, to the Home Ministry, to the Income Tax Department, everybody. A few of them didn't reapply for, their FCRA. So at least there's 20,000 there. That's a good start. Many of them can take you to scale. Many of them go beyond doing just at the community level and really tackling policies and systems that are leading to those problems. Why does the corporate sector shy away from funding policy change? They do that when they lobby the government for policy change in their favor. But any NGO that says that we would like the government to implement the right to education law better or the domestic violence law better, they say it's not our job to advocate for policies. We are happy doing something at the community level and build one school.
Okay.
We need to think out of the box. This is very important, you know. And I think if you look at it very critically, there are many, many different places or areas where you can contribute to. Okay, I'll use the food system exactly again, because that's where I come from.
Right.
If we're trying to have no hunger in India or malnutrition being addressed in India, you've got competencies for the IT sector, for example, beneficiary identification by the biometric system. You have got database management. You have got point-of-sale devices we're trying to put into the fair price shops. You have got manufacture and distribution and use and skilling on how to use point-of-sale devices in the fair price shops. You have got all these things are all IT related. If you want to do quick surveys, how many people actually are hungry? How many people are getting the food that they're supposed to get? How many people have grievance redressal that they want to now complain about what they're getting from the fair price shop? It is Vodafone, it is tech companies that can do this very quickly by, you know, SMS technology and stuff like that.
We do believe that as a company, there's also kind of pioneered stuff on mobile payments, M-Pesa in Africa and in India. We've done some transformative work and pilots already with state governments, because we realize that not everything can be done by us as a company, but we need partnerships, state and central governments.
What
You're
is
right.
missing, Balaji? Is it,
so pilots.
is it will? So you're
Technology
clearly
not
saying
a
that the
problem.
will is not missing.
So technology is not a problem, will is not missing, but moving from pilots to scale for some of these large-scale transformation projects require a mindset shift. If you push these things as the only choice, then it happens faster. If it's just one of many choices, then of course it doesn't matter. So therefore, I think the government has a significant role to play.
So I'm going to start with you, Ankur. Just take closing comments on, so one point on sustained engagement on some of the activities which might be volunteer employee driven, and on monitoring. How closely do you focus on that? And only when do we start focusing on monitoring will we actually be able to develop a more concrete roadmap?
When we start to work with a group of NGOs, we ensure that it is not just a one-off thing. We are seeing those projects come through. And one of the things we like to do is focus more on projects rather than a grant. So if you're going to do a project, then we do it end to end. As far as volunteering is concerned, I think one of the things we're encouraging is if our employees are passionate about a cause, then the organization is standing behind them, and their volunteer hours are being supplemented by also seeing if we can financially support those causes.
Sustained, number one, involvement, absolutely critical. At the same time, try to build capacity so that some of these projects can become sustainable by themselves is another focus for us as we kind of embark on this. So sustained initiative and sustainable business models, or to continue to kind of create scale. That's something that we focus strongly on.
Should it be about how does one prioritize what the company wants or what the country needs? A very stark question. If you look at how the world has changed in the last 15 years, from 2000 to 2015, the whole world agreed on a set of Millennium Development Goals. They were largely service delivery goals and largely the role of the government, and with some aid being provided by rich countries to a few countries. If you look at 2015 to 2030, the new Sustainable Development Goals, several things are very different. Our definition of development is much broader. So inequality now, reducing inequality is a goal, whereas earlier it was just poverty. So I think the private sector does not have the luxury to say we will do where our company's passion is. You are making a commitment in global fora everywhere to say we will do what the country needs. And if these are the things that the country needs, you have to create that passion in your employees and do development education.
Yeah, corporations are citizens too. You know, I think that's what we need to start looking at. Corporations as citizens and not just as, entities that come in from outside.
Yeah. India has moved steps and bounds beyond many other countries in the world to where they are today. The National Food Security Act, the CSR Act, which has been in place now, are things which I have never seen any other country take it to the extent in which it is being done in India. These are tremendous positive things that India can take forward as it takes the global stage now moving forward. However, I would like to make a small appeal. Nobody as a human being ever wants to be hungry. Nobody wants to go to bed hungry. Not a single person wants to go to bed hungry. If you go to school because you know you're going to get a midday meal as well. You see what I'm trying to say? CSR has a huge role to play in this. SDG 2 globally cannot move positively if it does not move in India. Thank you.
I think on that note, we're going to end this conversation. Thank you very much to all the panelists, and thank you for being an engaged audience.